And we are live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So today, we're going to be reviewing a conversation that Glenn Loury and John McWhorter had of recent about Ibram X. Kendi. And I know some of you may have looked at the title of this video and say, oh, John McWhorter destroys Glenn Loury, right? You might see that, oh, this is a bit hyperbolic. Well, I have my reasons for putting it that way, right? Because I think the conversation highlights something that I think it's sort of a concern for me with Glenn at times, and I think that John handled it expertly well. So this conversation is going to be about Glenn and John talking about Ibram X. Kendi for so now anyone who has followed this channel since its inception know that I started out the debate against a guy called Black is Beautiful, where I defended Glenn Loury against the charge by that guy that Glenn Loury is a coon. I was going through YouTube, I saw his video. He said Glenn Loury is a coon, and I was like, no. I said the only reason your video had this much views was because you even mentioned Glenn in it, and then we had that debate. So Glenn was very much a hero to me then. So much so that I told my pregnant wife that if our baby was a boy, that would name him Glenn. And that was how much I adored the man. But thankfully, it was a girl dodged that bullet. So for months after that, I continued to post clips of Glenn Loury on this channel and react to his comments. And I thought his message was a powerful one, and I still think so to an extent. However, I got tired of the show because it seemed like the same show every other week, talking about race with John McWhorter. And one person consistently featured in these conversations between Glenn and John is Ibram X. Kendi. You know, Glenn has no love for that man and has repeatedly called him a lightweight. I mean, I have as well. I've called Kendi a lightweight. In fact, my best performing video on this channel was titled Glenn Loury was right about Ibram X. Kendi. He's a lightweight. So I have no particular love for Kendi either. However, I do love sound critique and logical consistency and fairness in assessing someone or their work. Things I would rightly give to Glenn. But for some reason, when it comes to Kendi, Loury seems to skip all that and goes straight to name calling. He's an empty suit, lightweight, the emperor has no clothes, and so on and so forth. So following the revelations that have come out about how Kendi mishandled funds earmarked for anti-racist research, Glenn did a show with John McWhorter on Ibram X. Kendi for the 100th time, where the critique consisted substantially of name calling by Glenn Loury. But John McWhorter did something different. He challenged Glenn and even called him out for this, and it was a beauty to behold. So in this stream, I'll be analyzing that interaction. But before we begin, if you love what we do on this channel, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Support on Patron or become a channel member. And if you're looking for something fun and interesting to read, please check out my crime fiction novel, Hotel Shendam, on Amazon. And you would love it. So the links are in the description of this video. So let's dive into the conversation, right? Let's dive into the conversation. I'm going to play that clip and I will just react to it. So let's go. Yeah, I hope you can see my screen. I think you can see my screen. So let's go. All right.
You talk about it as if it was just, this thing happened, this mania struck society. Kendi happened to become identified as, this iconic thing, and so all of this largesse fell on him. It wasn't his fault. He took it. Anybody would have taken it. Don't be mad at him. And I'm saying he was venal. And moreover, that these stupid ideas have infected the minds of so many people. His books, the U.S. Army was buying his books and sending it out to people because that was the way in which you developed sensitivity on the racial question. It's poisonous. So stupidity on steroids in the name of my people, I object.
Glenn, if I may, This, like you said,
Well, you're going to anyway, but I'll give you my permission.
honesty is meant in friendship. You're not applying your full mental capacities to understanding a Kendi. He, and what I mean by that, you're not penetrating him.
Looks like it's Ibram X Kendi again.
All right, so that's the introduction, right? That's the introduction. So Glenn goes about on his, his diatribe on all the insults that he normally calls Kendi on, right? How Kendi is a lightweight, is stupid and all that. It's easy to call someone names when you don't even engage with their work. I'm no fan of Kendi, but I have read I've read one of his books, right? Glenn hasn't read any of Kendi's books. So on what basis is Glenn saying these things about Kendi? Now, well, the conversation is going to go on later, and John McWhorter is going to give his reasoning or his examples or his thoughts for why he thinks that Glenn is, is not employing his full mental capacities in trying to understanding Kendi, right? And Glenn himself has admitted that he hasn't read a Kendi. He hasn't read any of Kendi's work, right? So I think it would have made more sense for him to do his due diligence before critiquing this man, before critiquing Kendi. I read Kendi's book. I can't remember the name of the which of them I read, but I think it's the most popular one. Myself, Ogie, and Steve, we even had a show about it. And something stood out for me, at least for what I see about Kendi. Something stood out for me in the sense that I think he's a brilliant writer. I think he writes very well. I think he knows how to use words. I think he knows how to, construct sentences. Well, I think he understood that race was not a fixed category, right? He had this idea that, race was a construction, right? Race wasn't real. Now, the biggest issue I had with Kendi was his policy proposals or his solutions, which was basically saying you have to fix racism with racism. You have to fix discrimination with discrimination. That was my biggest issue with Kendi, right? So I thought that Glenn would have done his due diligence, read what Kendi has, read what the man has wrote. And then when you're giving your critique, that's academic forthrightness. You are critiquing someone, you say, oh, this person is a lightweight, this person, but you haven't even engaged with their work. You are taking their work based on some third-party analysis of what they've said or what they've done. Read their work and give an accurate critique. And then now, John has read Ibram X Kendi's work. So John is in a much better position to give any critique that I would want to listen to, because he has read Kendi's work. So his critique will be much more substantial, will be much more fair, would not be misrepresenting what Kendi has said. So let's go back to the conversation, right?
And it's the brouhaha at Boston University, the piece in the New York Times, in the Boston Globe pieces, people speaking out, disgruntled colleagues, administrative review of the Center for Anti-Racism Research.
What I want to know is this. Why is there so much joy about what happened to Kendi? Not only among conservatives, but in the media, it's people of all stripes who are so happy to see that guy getting his butt kicked. What is all this joy about? You're joyous. Why?
How do you know?
So the conversation kicks off with Glenn saying that he noticed that, John, I keep saying Glenn. John saying that he noticed that Glenn Loury is happy with all the misfortune that is coming to Ibram X Kendi, but he just wanted to understand why. Is this based on some, is this based on something objective, or is this just based on some personal animus? You just, you don't like this person. So now that he's going through this shit, you're just happy for it, right? And Glenn will try to explain why. Although he tries to say that, oh, he's not really happy. But you can see it from his face. He is happy that these things are happening to Kendi. Now, I don't care what's happening to Kendi. Either way, whether he's being praised or whether he's coming down, I really don't care.
I'm joyous.
Because you are. Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that's saying it's about time. but not for the reasons that a lot of people are thinking. I don't, like, for example, I don't think he's a grifter. I don't think that he's been trying to put one over on people. It's not that this near criminal is being brought to justice. I don't think of it that way at all. Do you?
Oh, John.
So it's very easy to call people grifters. It's very easy to say people are doing things simply for the money, right? But there are some people, even when they're saying something stupid, it may just be that they actually, truly, genuine believe the stupid shit that they're saying. So it's always better to err on the side of charity. I always like to give people charity. I think people are more stupid than they are sinister. I think people are more ignorant than they are evil or bad. So when I see certain things, people doing certain things, I don't immediately jump to say this person is doing this thing for money. Yeah, money can come in. They'll take the money if it's offered, if it's on the table, right? So, okay, let's look at Glenn himself, right? And this show that Glenn has done multiple shows about Ibram X Kendi over and over and over and over again, right? And he gets views from it, right? And he's getting YouTube revenue from it. He's getting Patreon subscriptions from it. He's getting some financial benefits from it. So would someone say that he's grifting off Kendi? Not necessarily, right? He's just giving social commentary and he's happening to be making money from it. So I like to extend that charity to people that I disagree with, right? Including Ibram X Kendi. I don't know what this guy's motivations are, but I'm not going to impugn any motivations on him. I'm going to engage with his work on an academic level and say, this is where you're right, this is where you're wrong. So every other thing is just, opinions. So you're just speculating as to what his motivations are, which I think what Glenn is doing.
I almost don't know what to say, but I'm going to, because we're friends, I'm going to pay you the respect of being honest with you. I mean, that just feels like a pose. The line that you were describing to me coming from you feels like a pose. Everybody is schadenfreude. Everybody's enjoying this disaster of this guy. Yep. They're crowing and whatnot. And I mean, sure, that's not very honorable. That's not very edifying, that kind of response. Chicken's coming home to roost. What did Malcolm X say after the Kennedy assassination? That kind of thing. That's cheap. That's not. And I don't think that's where I'm coming from. But you, instead of going to the heart of the matter, which is an empty suit was elevated to an academic guru position and a ton of money fell on him. And the whole thing fell about because he was an empty suit, which reveals the superficiality of the virtue signaling mania that ensued after George Floyd got killed in Minneapolis in 2020. There was never any there. The emperor had no clothes. This is precisely Hans Christian Andersen's Emperor's New Clothes situation. This is the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain that's been revealed. Instead of that, you use your lofty position and your megaphone of influence to ask questions about the people who are happy to see the whole thing fall apart. It was...
So, okay. There are a couple of things going on here. Possible for someone to be a bad administrator, cause is right. It's very possible for someone to be their cause is also wrong. So the fact that they doesn't directly correlate with their what they were trying to do. Kendi was said to have mismanaged funds. In fact, this whole thing, when it came out, was, he reduces the staff. He reduced the staff, and those staffs came out and said he mismanaged funds. That's about what this whole thing is about. It's not like there's one very big scandalous thing that's come out. Maybe there is, maybe I'm not aware of it, but that's the much I know. There are some people that are just terrible at being, being managers. There's some people that cannot handle projects. Yes, for the fact that the project failed it might just speak to their skills as someone who cannot manage a project, not even speaking to the ideas itself. So I'm listening to this critique now that Glenn is giving, and I'm seeing insults. I've not seen him point to any specific thing about Kendi, about his ideas, and tear it apart. I've not seen him say, this very specific thing, this thing that Kendi has said, this doesn't make any sense, right? And these are the reasons why it doesn't make any sense. But I keep hearing it's an empty suit. I keep hearing he's, the emperor has no clothes. I keep hearing all those things. Yeah. Those are insults, right? I need substantive arguments, not name calling. And that's basically what I'm against in this conversation.
Rotten to the core. The whole thing was absurd. He was going to solve the racial inequality problem through anti-racist research. He's an empty suit. He doesn't know anything. That's been obvious from day one. So it's not.
So when I first saw this clip on YouTube, on Twitter, I said something. I said someone should please give Professor Loury an Oscar for this incredible performance of moral indignation, of righteous indignation, right? No, it's easy to just... Did Kendi say he was going to solve racial issues, or he was proposing, he was giving proposals? Isn't that what people do? Do people really say they're going to solve a problem? Now, that's more in the sphere of politicians, right? Politicians will tell you that they can do what they cannot do, right? But I don't think, just to be fair to Kendi, I don't think he ever said that he's going to solve the problem. He's saying, okay, this is a problem that I've noticed. These are my proposals. However you disagree with the proposals, which I do disagree with, right? But that's not amounting to him saying he's going to solve the problem. For example, Glenn made an example that he was once the head of an anti-racist organization, what have you, something like that, when they produce anti-racist research. Did Glenn's research solve the problem of racism? Did it solve anything? These are just academic things, right? At times they're not meant to solve anything. At times they're just merely academic exercises. So saying that Kendi has failed because he hasn't solved the problem, when I don't think he set out to solve the problem in the first place. He was just giving proposals.
Not about him.
Right.
It's about the institutions and about the mania of that moment. And by the way, the consequences of the mania of that moment are playing out in real lives all across this country, with cities overrun with ill-behaved people, with law enforcement apparatus being pulled back, with ridiculous ideology, with failed school systems, with mediocrity everywhere you look. Kendi is just a symptom of something that was very deeply and profoundly wrong. What about Black Lives Matter? What has become of them? What about Ta-Nehisi Coates and Nicole Hannah-Jones? Yes, I will go there. What has become of them? They were going to go to Howard and build some kind of center. Where is it? I'm disappointed that you didn't go for the jugular. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is, who's jugular? Kendi is not an academic. He is not a scholar. And I don't mean that as a put down. I mean, that's not what he does. What he wants to be is an anti-racism activist. He happened to get a doctorate. And
so this point that John is making is a very, very important point. And I see right-wingers making this mistake a lot. They look at activists and then, the activists, they can be as inarticulate in, making their positions known. They can be disruptive, they can be rowdy and all that. You look at those activists and you just dismiss what they are saying because they are inarticulate, because, they are not refined, right? Let's use quote unquote the climate change, whatever, right? So when people look at the activists are usually the loudest ones. They are not scientists, so they are not going to be able to interpret the data very well. They are going to take an apocalyptic stance. But if you look at the activists themselves, you're going to dismiss that whole, there might probably be a problem there. So why don't you engage with the actual scholars, the actual scientists, and hear what they have to say instead of just dismissing it firsthand? So in this case, like John is saying, Kendi is not an academic. This guy is an activist. He's an anti-racist activist. You're going to take him more seriously than that. You're going to give him some sort of elevation that that's not even within his realm. I don't think that's fair.
you get a doctorate, it does open certain doors. That's understandable, but it's painfully clear from his CV, from frankly just listening to him for about 5 minutes, that he's not an academic. And if you put it the right way, you could even say it to him and he might even agree. for it. He's out in society trying his version of trying to change real lives, but that's not a scholar. However, all of a sudden in 2020, he gets swept up into this institution where he's supposed to be supervising.
And then you've got to ask yourself, who were those who put Kendi in this pedestal? Mostly liberal white people who, they are looking for a black face to assuage themselves of, to absolve themselves of their quote unquote white guilt. They were the ones who put this man on the pedestal. They were the ones calling him to speak at certain events and paying him ridiculous sums of money and worshiping his literal feet. They were the ones who gave him this platform. You expect him to not take it? Really?
Real research. If you tried to have me administrate something, I would have that thing a smoking hole in the ground in 2 weeks. I would have no idea what I was doing. I don't want to do it. I get the feeling he's similar. He hadn't had any experience running anything, and he's not terribly interested in doing it. I feel him there, but he gets thrust into this position. Why would we expect him not to take it? Is he really supposed to say, no, I'm not a real researcher, or I don't do what these people do? What would I be doing supervising these people? The jugular here is Boston University. Okay. The jugular is anybody in 2020 and thereon who has casually referred to him with terms like scholar and academic and intellectual, and it's clearly...
What about the McWhorter Foundation?
You don't want to sound like...
I hate this thing that Glenn does, this whataboutism. Grown man should not be using whataboutisms as an argument. I think it should be banned. Whataboutism should be banned as a form of argument. But John was going to say something important, so I'll take it back.
Who has casually referred to him with terms like scholar and academic and intellectual, and it's clearly...
What about the McWhorter Foundation?
You don't want to sound like you're jealous, but frankly, that too...
Yeah, it does come across like Glenn is jealous. It does come across like Glenn, he's saying, I'm a much more qualified person. I'm not getting the recognition. And see this Kendi, who is not as qualified as me, is getting all this recognition. It does come across as being jealous. And John is pointing out something there. Maybe possible that Glenn isn't jealous, but he does come across like that.
About didn't he win a National Book Award?
Yes, he did. And frankly, you have. And so that's the jugular that you go for, in that there is sometimes a lowered sense of what an academic is when it comes to what Black figure is going to be celebrated. I cannot be mad at Kendi for that. I mean, he just got swept up into something where I think all of us would have taken the money. All of us would have taken the fame. All of this fell apart because he was chosen for something that he shouldn't have been chosen for. But why be mad at him?
I don't know why defending him from anybody's anger is of concern to you, but you can keep your own counsel on that.
But I don't understand this. You don't know why defending him from anybody's anger is... It's, you guys are having a conversation, it's a critique. He obviously disagrees with you on this. So calling into question John's motivations is a little bit, not very charitable.
Let me just posit, I'm not, as it were, mad at him when I point out that he's a fraud. When I point out that he's an empty suit, that, as I said, he's a lightweight.
Okay?
When
insults.
I call it...
No substantial rebuttal of anything that Kendi has done or said. All insults, mind you.
Attention to the vacuity and the emptiness of the rhetoric. How to raise an anti-racist baby? Come on. So,
Glenn, have you read that book? Have you read the book at all? Now, I'll give an example with Charles Murray, right? There's this idea of Charles Murray out there, oh, he's a racist and all that. I recently began reading one of Charles Murray's book, and it gave me a better understanding of where he's coming from, right? And I have more sympathy for his positions now that I've read his book, or I'm reading his book, than before I read his book, right? if you read Charles Murray's book, you will see that he himself does not even believe in the idea of race, of a fixed category of race. When he was explaining ancestral populations and all that, it was almost sounding like a sort of very fluid. There are no boundaries. We don't know where one population starts from and the other begins. Something like that. But if I hadn't read that book, I would assume that, oh, this man believes that, oh, race is a very fixed category. There's the white race, there's the black race. In fact, he doesn't even use race in that book as so far as I've read it. So I think people should do their due diligence. Academics should do their due diligence. Glenn is just going off emotions here. It's just going off emotions. You haven't read one of Kendi's book. None. In this episode, although it's not in this clip, the full episode, he admitted it that he's not read any of Kendi's book. But he keeps calling him names. Does names substitute for arguments? Does it substitute for a reasonable critique? I don't think so.
Glenn,
I'm not mad at him to say you an embarrassment. You're an absurdity. That's simply a description.
That's not accurate, Glenn. You can't call him an embarrassment or an absurdity when he was put into a position by other people. If anything, they made him make himself into an embarrassment. It wasn't his fault. If things were the way they ordinarily would be under normal standards of evaluation, he would be an obscure Black studies professor teaching at some state university. That's what he was before all these things happened to him by chance. But he got swept up into something. How can you call that person an embarrassment when it's not his fault? The embarrassment is BU. I'm embarrassed for Boston University as a representative of what American higher education can be.
So how is John able to make more sense in this situation? How is John able to make more sense? And Glenn isn't even saying this thing at all. You, the university, you have the standards. You deliberately lowered your standards and you brought in people who were not qualified. And then you're surprised that they are failing, or you're accusing them that they are failing when you obliterated the standards, you removed the standards. Like Jonas said, it's Boston University who has elevated this man who's obviously not qualified to be in that position, who's elevated him to that position. They are the ones that you should be embarrassed for, that they have tarnished the image of their institution. They are the ones that you should have all this ire and vitriol for.
Well, then let's talk about that. I mean, because I agree with you that that's really the issue. And I'm not.
Now. So you see what Glenn is doing? Now he's switching that he agrees with John. Suddenly you agree with John because there's nowhere to go from here, right? And this is the thing with, smart people can make mistakes and they can make rookie mistakes. And this is not something that I thought that Glenn would be making, right? But I just think that there's some sort of personal animus that drives his analysis of Kendi, right? The sort of recognition that Kendi is getting. Glenn has been in this game for decades, probably before Kendi was born, and then he's probably not getting the same kind of recognition. I can see how some sort of jealousy might creep in, but that's me speculating too, right?
I don't have a stake in up or down on Kendi as such. I think his own biography and arc of his career speaks for itself. Why don't we talk about the institutional problem here?
What they
because
did,
as I say, it's not just BU. It's much broader than that.
What BU did is an insult to Black intelligence. But let me change that because that's too mean to Kendi. What BU did, he doesn't deserve it. What BU did is an insult to Black achievement. And the best defense I can imagine they would have is that, of course, showbiz is part of things and showbiz does attract funds. But the idea that you, on the one hand, could be heading an anti-racist center that was so excellent 30 years ago, and that as if he was remotely capable of doing the same thing, is utterly miscast. is a diminishment of blackness. The people who did that ought to be ashamed of themselves, frankly.
What about the people who paid him 40
So
grand?
I've got to ask, what did Glenn Loury's Anti-Racist Center produce? What significant change in race relations did it produce? What impact did it have in culture, in society? Now he's critiquing Kendi, that Kendi is a failure. What can we look back to and say, for the period that Glenn was heading an anti-racist center, these are the substantial things that was achieved, right? Was it purely on an academic level? Was it purely on an academic sphere? Or did it have, some far-reaching effect in society? It's easy to call people names and say they're not deserving of some, but you've got to back it up with evidence. And also considering the fact that you have a record in that same line, people can also pull out your records and say, oh, what did you do? What did you achieve when you were part of that anti-racist center, when you were heading that anti-racist research center?
And to show up and give a half-hour-long talk without a Q&A. Do you want to put them on the list of people to castigate?
It almost feels like they're displaying that woman who was supposed to be George Washington's.
I am not going to insult my podcast, for example, by inviting someone to my podcast and just giving him softball questions and not pushing back and not asking the tough questions and, just letting him say whatever he wants to say if it is obviously wrong. The viewers should hold me responsible for that, because I'm supposed to be moderating the conversation and I'm just letting the person get away with nonsense, right? So when you're looking at Kendi and say, oh, Kendi is a failure, you've got to look at the people who elevated him to that position, knowing that he might not be qualified to hold such positions. That's where the real critique should be. Even Glenn himself said that Kendi is a symptom of a bigger problem. If it's not Kendi today, it's going to be someone else that they're going to look for one blackface and put there, or it's going to be Robin DiAngelo, it's going to be some other thing. So these are systemic institutional issues, right? Mostly being championed by white liberal people.
Nursemaid, and she was supposed to be 104 years old. It's like they're showing off a Negro. I don't have any problem with them taking the money if it's offered, but the idea that they would pretend.
Is Glenn not going to take, if someone is, there's an organization sponsoring the Glenn show. Is Glenn not taking that money? Is he not taking it? Is he going to pass up economic opportunities, right, to further his worldview? Kendi has a different worldview. You can disagree with it or not, but to say that, him taking money is for pushing his own worldview is grifting, that's a low. That's a low, because people can say the same thing about Glenn too, that you taking money for pushing your own worldview is amounts to grifting as well.
That anything that particular person has to say is worth that much money, it's an insult. It's making a black person a show, in a way. And yeah, I think that's disgusting, but it's not him, it's them.
All right. So now that the conversation is over, right? Let me put the link so people can call in and let's talk. Let me hear your thoughts on this conversation that Glenn and John just had. Like I've been saying, I think everybody should do their due diligence. When you're critiquing someone, you need to come with facts, you need to come with evidence, you need to know what you're saying. It's not just about calling them names, right? I'll be much more inclined to agree with Glenn. I'm much more sympathetic with his position, but I will not be unfair. I will not be uncharitable in characterizing someone because I don't like their positions. I will try my best to be as charitable as possible. Stanley, how you doing? Welcome.
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I put most of my notes in your Discord.
Okay.
I just took notes as I was watching your video. I've seen this clip before.
So let's hear your thoughts.
Well, first off, my main thought is, John is being disingenuous because most of the things Glenn has said, John has said in the past.
Okay.
Just go back 2 years or so and look at some of those videos. As a matter of fact, the roles were reversed about 2 or 3 years ago. John was the one, being all histrionic. Um, and, basically, these two are the mirror image of Ibram Kendi. Um, what Kendi does on the proverbial left, they do on the right. Glenn makes his money, and he's a member of the Manhattan Institute, which is a think tank, because of his views on race. So, that Kendi is doing it from an opposite perspective, I think is disingenuous. And the center at Boston College that Kendi's running, I think it's more a think tank than an actual academic, institution, like the Manhattan Institute, etc. And the thing is only 3 years old. I'm not taking up for Kendi. I'm just saying these two were being mighty disingenuous. And
Yeah.
John isn't actually being any kinder than Glenn is. John is being basically patronizing, basically saying that Kendi didn't know what he was doing and got taken advantage of. He's basically infantilizing Kendi. So John isn't any more, quote, sympathetic.
Yeah, so he isn't any more sympathetic, but I think that he had a better position of, will you say, worse positions in this current interaction, right? Because
I would tend to disagree. He's just a lot more subtle about it.
oh, so he's a lot more subtle. You think that what they were saying was exactly the same?
No, not the same. I'm saying that Glenn is calling. They're both calling Kendi a charlatan. Glenn is saying he's venal. John is saying that, hey, he just doesn't know what he's doing. He's kind of like a babe in the woods. They're both saying he's a charlatan, just for different reasons.
Interesting.
Well, no,
Oh,
think about it. Basically,
well,
all John is saying is, oh, hey, he's not venal. He's an idiot, but he's still a charlatan.
that's a very creative way of saying it
Hey,
for
it's
John.
more subtle, it sounds gentler, and it's less likely to, piss people off. John is smart that way. He's good with language, remember?
Hmm. So what
And
do you
quite
think?
frankly, John's position at Columbia,
Hmm.
Columbia has lowered their academic standards because John is working a non-tenure track. Okay, John is not making major contributions to the field of linguistics. So I think John is also being a little bit of a hypocrite. John right now is not an academic. He's not doing any research, but he works at Columbia.
His books don't count for research?
Okay, but they're not academic works. They're popular works, just like Anti-Racist Baby is not an academic work. This
Okay.
last book that John wrote about woke, I think it was, woke
Woke
something
racism.
or another, that's not an academic book. John hasn't written an academic book in years. You didn't know this?
No, I did not.
John has not written an academic book in years, not that I know of. And I mean, generally, the last two books he's published have been popular works. They have not been academic books. So he's kind of
So,
being disingenuous as well.
so what do you think about Glenn critiquing Kendi's work, having never read any of his book?
I think Glenn is triggered because Kendi is doing the same thing that John does. I'm sorry, that Glenn does. Glenn has profited off of being a race man. The only difference is he's on the right and Kendi is nominally on the left. And I don't even think Kendi's on the left. Most of the left doesn't respect Kendi either. I think Glenn has made money being at the Manhattan Institute and all that because of his views on race. And he's mad at Kendi for doing the same thing, except Kendi's views on race are opposite. I think Glenn is such a hypocrite with this criticism that it's almost unwatchable. He's coming off more as a comedian than he is as a serious critique.
Yeah, when I saw the clip, the short clip, like the 3 minutes clip he posted on Twitter, I was disgusted by it because I was like, really, this is more like a performance art, right? You're just showing moral indignation. There was nothing substantive there. It was just insult, 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 and showing emotions. I'm like, really?
You are absolutely right. And the performance you talk about is for the Manhattan Institute crowd. Okay, this is performance art to be clipped and appreciated by his Manhattan Institute colleagues and audience.
Wow. But no,
I don't believe me?
See, I see this trend a lot with a lot of Western, intellectuals, right? Jordan Peterson is another one, and all that, and it's so interesting to me, and it's funny to me that, like someone like me, I couldn't possibly act or put up a show,
right.
like, if I don't genuinely believe it, I'm not going to say it. And I'm not going, especially I'm not going to take money to say it, right? And I'm not going to pretend, not once, not twice. I'm not going to pretend for months and years, right? Basically making a caricature of myself. So is
John's credit, I don't think Glenn is pretending, and I don't think Kendi is pretending.
Okay. So you
I
think
mean, you can believe in what you're saying and still be a showman when you say it.
Yeah, it's the showman part that just rubs me the wrong way.
But you know what? From a Glenn perspective, as an economist, hey, being able to commodify your belief system, if you can make money doing it, commodify it. That is total free market economy.
Capitalism. Whoa. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on,
What's
Charles?
up, Wolf?
I'm good. I didn't even know you was live, Charles. Again, I didn't get the notification.
Yeah, I don't know why YouTube keeps doing that, right? Yeah, so we're talking about Glenn and Kendi, the debate on sort of debate on Ibram X, Glenn and John sort of debate on Ibram X Kendi, where Glenn was basically calling Kendi, the usual stuff, a lightweight, a charlatan, and all that. Having never read any of Kendi's work, so I was taking the position that, calling insults and name calling doesn't substitute for a useful critique, right? You can call someone all the names you want to call them. It doesn't mean they are right. It doesn't mean they are wrong, right? I'd rather you engage with the ideas. I'd rather you engage with their positions than with their personality or their having ad hominem attacks on them. So I just thought it was a low point for Glenn. Taking into consideration the fact that Glenn hasn't read not even one of Kendi's book. However terrible the books are, he hasn't read any. So on what grounds is he making these critiques of Kendi?
Well, the thing is, Glenn is doing what many on the right and left do. Glenn is critiquing based on what people he respects on the right believe. People critique in the blind. You would be surprised how much People will go on MSNBC or Fox News and critique stuff they actually haven't engaged with.
Mm-hmm.
It happens all the time. As a matter of fact, I'd be willing to say it happens more times than not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wolf, let me hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I haven't read too much of Kendi's work. I know a little bit about Glenn. I don't know too much about John, so I'm kind of just going off what y'all are saying here. But obviously, I kind of agree. I think you should at least have a basis of understanding of what you're critiquing before you critique it. Otherwise, you can say some ignorant things, and then it kind of makes you seem less intelligent and less credible going forward.
Exactly. Exactly.
I want to make one point, though. Glenn's argument, Anti-Racist Baby, is not an academic book by any means. It's essentially a pamphlet. So what his argument is that he's like way off base. I mean, you could make the same argument about, say, the Federalist Papers. Okay, the Federalist Papers were not an academic treatise, but they're famous. They were a bunch of pamphlets that got published in the newspapers back in 1789. They were never a book. They didn't have any, like references or citations. It was a popular work that became a classic. Glenn's talk about Anti-Racist Baby being non-academic is just like his critique is non-academic for that matter.
Yeah.
So what is he critiquing the idea of Ibram X. Kendi's racism, or is it a whole different other thing?
So it was basically, this whole scandal that it's really a scandal. Ibram X. Kendi, there were reports that he's mismanaged funds in the institute that he's running because he fired some staff. He cut down his staff strength, and then the staff made the accusation that he mismanaged funds, and there's been this uproar about all that. So that was what the show was about, right? Talking about how Kendi has failed, how his ideas are, not useful, and all that.
Okay, now is the claims against him just like within the past year or two, or has it been going on for some time?
Just a few weeks now.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I can't. That's not enough time to me because obviously, economically speaking, right now a lot of people ain't doing super great. So it could just be he's having to cut back a little bit on staff due to the economy not being super great.
Well, I mean, basically, he received a bunch of donations and large donations, like the dude who ran Twitter before Musk or owned Twitter before Musk donated $10 million. I'm not going to say he mismanaged it because I'm sure Kendi isn't doing the day-to-day managing of money. So it'll all come out in the wash. I will agree that, something that's like less than a month or two old, I think Glenn is jumping the gun here. Nobody's been convicted or even indicted or anything like that.
Yeah. You need to go speak to his accountant or his asset manager because that's the guy that's going to have all the records. I mean, you got to take this into account.
These are the guys. These are the guys who are all like into logic and critical thinking and all this stuff. I don't see a lot of critical thinking going on in this particular clip.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say wait till the audit happens. I'm sure they're going to audit him. The IRS probably will to see what his assets are if it becomes a big issue. And I would, like I said, he might not even know. And people, got to keep that in mind until all the facts are there. Don't throw him under the bus yet because he might not have known.
Glenn doesn't need facts, apparently.
Now, I will say, if he's guilty of something, then, charge him and do what you got to do. But people got to stop, going after people until all the facts are at least present. I don't think that's fair to that person's character to do that.
Well, they don't. They don't care about his character.
Yeah, yeah. So, how's it been with? Have you guys been keeping up with what's happening with Israel and Hamas? Let me hear your thoughts on that.
Um, I think both sides have a point. I'm not really into that other than superficially. I think I think my only comment is a lot of people are, as usual, want to bring American history and they're comparing, the black struggle, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement. They're doing a whole lot of comparisons. And I'm not a big fan of international comparisons, saying that the way Israel is, treating the Palestinians is like Jim Crow. That kind of comparison gives me the willies because it's similarities don't mean it's the same. I mean, like, in my opinion, is too strong a metaphor or simile.
Mm. Wolf, what do you think?
I mean, obviously, I'm not a big proponent of wars. I know a little bit about it. I did a little bit of reading on it today, but what I will say is I think that there needs to be a resolution made because obviously, people are dying. I mean, there was videos all over Twitter that were pretty graphic of people just being executed. So I think that I don't think America needs to get involved, but at the same time, Israel is an ally of the United States. So I just that's a tough call to me because I just don't like death and people being murdered like that. It's just not good, man.
Hey,
Yeah,
I just want,
go
never
ahead,
mind.
Sally. Go ahead, go
No,
No,
ahead.
go
no,
ahead,
no.
Stanley.
It's off topic. It's a comment
Okay.
someone made.
So I
The
think it's an
YouTube
Go ahead.
channel.
unfortunate. I think it's an unfortunate situation, right? You know,
Yeah.
for me, me of years ago or me of 6 months ago would be staunchly pro-Israel, right? Because
Hmm.
uh, Israel, the Israelis are the good guys, the Palestinians are terrorists, are the bad guys. But I think these conflicts are much more nuanced than a good guy, bad guy situation, right? I
Hmm.
understand that Hamas is a terrorist organization. I mean, anybody who
Yeah.
uses terror, even if you're fighting for a just cause, when you kill innocent people, civilians, and you use terror to try to further your aims, you are a terrorist, right? So I do sympathize with the Palestinian cause in the sense that with the formation of the state of Israel in, I think, 1947 or 48, many of them were driven from their villages and they've sort of been pushed into that narrow strip of land, and it's almost like, Israel barricades that place, right? So it's almost like, as people keep saying in Twitter, an open air prison, right? So the claim of the Israelis to the land, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that you can leave a place after thousands of years and still lay claim to that place, right? I think that most of the Jews who returned to Israel, I think they were Europeans. I think Europe was their home. I think they should have stayed in Europe, right? But the and rabid anti-Semitism of Christian Europe would not allow that. And what happened to after what happened to Jews in the Second World War, it seemed necessary for them to have their own state, right? And the British always causing problems everywhere they go. They divided up Palestine and gave it to European Jews. It wasn't theirs to just give out, it wasn't theirs to partition and give out, but they did anyway. And you know, throughout the years, both sides have been sabotaging efforts to reconcile. For me, when the state of Israel was formed, I would have preferred a one state solution in the sense that all people in the land of Israel then become naturalized Israeli citizens. But the because of the religious and the ethnic, Israel is an ethno-religious state, so they would want to maintain majority Jewish population, right? And absorbing millions of Arabs would be counter to that. So strategically, it was sort of an imperative to kick out the Arabs and just have this place for Jewish people only. But I think it was a mistake. I think it was a mistake, right? I don't believe in ethno-religious states, whether they be Christian, whether they be Islamic, whether they be Jewish. I think people should live in states, whatever their religious affiliations, right? So it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess when you consider the religious aspects of it, the ethnic aspect of it, and the political aspect of it. Well, I think a whole lot of it has to do with the politics of the whole thing. So,
Well, the interesting thing, and irony actually kind of made the best comparison. Israel's formation was a lot. And I just said that I shudder when people make comparisons. But in this comparison, I agree with. The way Israel was formed was like a masterclass in colonialism. It's, the comparison he made was the Louisiana Purchase in early American history. Essentially, the U.S. gave land that it took. Britain created Israel out of land that it had colonized because they claimed the right to the land. In a historic sense, Britain, giving away land that you basically forcibly took, of course you're going to reap what you sow 100 years later.
okay.
So the problem is not a present politics problem. The problem is deep. And in Israel, Israel's case, it goes deeper than European colonialism. It goes back 2,000 years.
how
It's
does it
not
really go?
politics. It's a
How does it
it's a Go ahead. I'm
how does
sorry.
it go? How does it go back 2,000 years?
That part of the world has had struggles forever.
Really?
Arabs and Jews have been enemies. How old is Islam? I don't even remember. 700, 900 years?
I thought it was older than that.
It might be, but this is like this problem between Arabs and Jews has been going on. Charles, you know this.
I do, but the case of Israel is a unique one.
No, it's actually not.
Why is it not?
It was formed. Well, the problem with Israel is actually similar to Africa. It has been. Israel was carved across. If I want, the rough parallel is it was carved across tribal lines.
So
Nobody
this
went.
is
Nobody went to the inhabitants of Palestine and said, "Oh, hey, do you mind if we take your land and give it to another group?" It
which
was
is the
done
problem.
forcibly.
Which is the problem, which is part of the problem, right? So you can look at Black Laptop Hustler. I'm going to mute you. I'm going to mute you now, right? So get the hell out. Mr. Pelu, welcome to the conversation.
How you doing?
Good. It's been a long time. So I'm sure you have something to say about the Israel-Palestine situation. So please, floor
Yeah,
is yours.
yeah. Wolf invited me. He just told me about it, so I didn't think about it. But of course, but you're correct. Of course, everybody. If that's what the topic is, of course, everybody has thought about it because it's been a major news story, and I've thought about it. And and it was something that was unfortunately bound to happen because of the forces but and the tensions. But I put a disclaimer that I don't endorse any acts of war that go beyond the acceptability of Islamic morality, and so I do acknowledge there could be war crimes, and if anybody's guilty of any of those, I totally disavow them. I want to make that apparent, and because war crimes are just in essence just terrorism, and there's a difference between jihad and is a difference between kinetic jihad and terrorism, and that distinction does need to be made. All right.
Yeah.
So I don't condone. I totally reject it, and I totally reject the validity of any war crimes that were committed by any side. I'm not making any particular accusations. I've heard accusations. I haven't looked at evidence piece by piece. So, but I don't think it's happened in war, and I won't be surprised if everything came out to be a lot of what they said came out to be how it was, and some things that could be considered terrorism or war crimes could be done, because there is limitations of war even in Islam. Right.
So I like you said, anybody that uses terror to, even if your cause is just, well, when you attack civilians and you use terror, you're a terrorist, and it can never be justified, right? And
yes,
I think
it
that's
can
what
never be
Hamas is
justified.
doing.
It can never be. It's because it's not Islamically justified, so that has to be established. But unfortunately, it says some. But as a Muslim, I do understand why all this stuff has happened. And because you have to understand that the main issue more than anything on the Islamic side is that particular area is a religious site, right? It's not Mecca where we have to go do Hajj, but it's still after Medina, as they say, is the third holiest city, because it was important because of where the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, by Islamic in the Islamic an Islamic sacred intellectual tradition, that was a place he ascended to paradise. Whether you want to think about it physically,
but the thing
or
is,
just
when he
metaphor.
did that land was held by Jews. So
No, it wasn't held by Jews then. You get to understand. Okay, look, Charles. Okay, you have to understand the history, right? The Jews had already been in exile and been displaced out of Israel, Palestine, Canaan, however you want to call it, out of the land of Israel. And I acknowledge there is a land of Israel, because even the Quran talks about Bani Israel, and they went to the Ard al-Muqaddas, so they went to the Holy Land, and they were given that land. So so even because you say even the prophets of Israel are also Islamic prophets. So no, but go into the actual archaeological evidence and the actual historical record, right? We know they had those revolts in the Roman Jewish wars, like in the first century of ADs, and the Jews became displaced by then. Muhammad and Islam, Muhammad peace upon him, and Islam and Islamic revelation didn't come until the 600s AD. It was way after the expulsion, because at that time it had been ruled by the Roman Empire, and after that, the Roman Empire had in the 300s AD converted to Christianity, so it was under the Christian Roman Empire, and the eastern half of it, Eastern Rome, also in Western academia known as the Byzantine Empire. So that's who the Muslims conquered it from. They didn't conquer it from ancient Israel. We conquered it from the Roman Empire, from the Eastern Roman Empire.
But you acknowledge that the land was once Jewish land.
Of course, I mean, I'm gonna say ancient Israelites, but we both acknowledge the ancient Israelites, but we acknowledge the ancient Israelites. We call them Israel.
They were there before Islam even came into being.
I know
correct?
that we as I said, we acknowledge
ancient
Israelites.
That's my only point.
No. That's correct. That's absolutely correct. There's no way we could deny ancient Israel, right? But in our tradition, we have more right to ancient Israel than anyone else, because we are the successors of the prophet.
That's in your tradition. How about the other traditions who don't agree?
I'm just explaining from the Islamic perspective. I totally understand that. I totally understand that this is an internal Islamic matter. I totally understand that. I totally understand that. I totally can see that.
I have a question, by the way. Israel has targeted civilians, or I won't say targeted, but there's been a lot of you essentially Gaza is the most densely packed area on Earth. Okay, there is no way you can do a massive attack in Gaza and not have collateral damage. By your argument, Israel could be called terrorists.
Um, the problem is, see, that's why you can't be the aggressor, because I would lean.
Okay, well, you can't say Israel has never been an
I would
aggressor.
give more rights to retaliation to the defender than I would give rights to attack to the aggressor. In other words,
Okay, but you also realize that Israel not a few weeks before this attack had basically started building, I think it was 5,000 more homes on former Palestinian territory. So
yeah, I know.
Israel is not an innocent bystander.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
The reason why I started, wait. The reason why I started what I said before, because I was going to distinguish that, yes, there is such thing as jihad. And I do think the Palestinians have a right to a jihad. But now I also think the jihad has a right to go into terrorism. That's what I'm trying to say.
That part I agree with.
So I'm saying there is a jihad, and I'm not even accusing and making an accusation of terrorism. I'm just being the caveat that Islam does not condone some things that go into extreme, and if it goes into these extremes, it's not from Islam. That's what I'm trying to. That's why I started off with that.
It's actually kind of an interesting point you made, because, and this is something we can talk about later because it's beyond the scope of this show, but the left and the right in the United States are an interesting dichotomy. But anyway, yeah, I don't fundamentally disagree with what you're saying. I just want to make sure that it's understood that it might be passive aggressive, but Israel is almost constantly aggressive in one way, shape, or form.
It's
in my opinion, you reap what you sow.
No, it's a conquering force. Israel it's a militant force that came and conquered it, and it's a militant. It has been made militant, by its military actions and its compulsive military drafting. I mean, it's a militant occupational society. I mean, and I'm not saying that because I'm not saying that I'm totally against any type of occupation. Of course, I'm a Muslim. I prefer the Islamic occupation because we are imperialistic too. So, but it was from the perspective of the Muslims, it is definitely a conquering force, like an intrusion into Darul Islam, right? And that's what's compelling the Muslims more than anything, to try to find a way to get them out of there. But especially as a sovereign power, like especially because it's a holy site, the Muslims want it under. They would always rather prefer it to be under Muslim sovereignty. That's the issue. That's the fundamental issue why the Muslims can't just let Israel just be how it is, because it's like a conquering force that came into the heart of Dar Islam and is occupying a holy site.
So now that you've said this, Mr. Pelou, this is, for me, I try to understand it as a geopolitical problem, right? But with what you just explained now, which is a position I used to hold, but I just try to say, well, religion is not as important in this conflict as much as it is geopolitics. This makes it an infinitely much more complex problem to solve. At least it makes it an impossible problem to solve, because the Jews are laying claims to the land on religious basis. The Muslims are laying claim to the land on religious basis. Both sides are not going to budge. Why? I mean, why don't why is it so important? Why is it so important that both sides lay claim to this land for religious purposes? Why can't people just be?
It's because it's because we did.
Okay, well, essentially,
Stanley, please let him finish.
No. It's because when you deal with religion, especially extremely monotheistic religions like how Islam and Judaism is, it's like God didn't have to be the highest. And if you say your religion is representing God's name, you don't want anything else above it. Now, is that land is important to us religiously, but it's like we got to make this a religious thing. Now, if Israel becomes really religious and we compete, look, okay, if this jihad helps us be better people internally, there's a way through because you know what I'm trying to say, because jihad is basically fighting for the moral high ground. It's always best the people who fight for the moral high ground, and we all got to be on our moral high ground. And if it forces both sides to stay on the moral high ground, I think it's ultimately a good thing for everybody, humanity, because we're one human race, and we should always be uplifting each other. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and we need people to be more. I mean, I don't know the right recipe for everybody. How we're going to get everybody to it? I mean, it's going to take internal reform. It's going to take internal reform. Yeah.
The moral high ground in this case is literally holy ground. Okay, and both sides consider the ground they're fighting on holy. So it is tied into religion. So you can't just be and be a good Christian. You can't just be and be a good Muslim. That's not how the religion works. They're dynamic religions.
I'm trying to get your point though. I'm trying to get okay. So yeah, okay.
Well, now I'm answering Charles's point. Why can't they just be? They can't just be. The religion doesn't allow for that.
And
I mean Christian. I mean Jew. Jewish more so. They're not a proselytizing religion, but Christianity, for instance, you can't just be a good Christian. To be a good Christian, you have to proselytize to a certain extent.
Well, Pedro, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, you're right though. Wait. Real quick.
I was going to say one thing.
No, I want to say one thing. Yeah. Because even us, we call it dawa. But what I'm trying to say, dawa doesn't have to get into violence. It doesn't have to get into aggression. We never need aggressive dawa. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, but the religion of Islam is definitely a dawah. But that's our word for our missionary, the missionality of Islam, the missionary bent, the dissemination factor. Anyway, Wolf, take it over.
So, Pelu, my question would be like, why can't the Palestinians find like a way to do it like how the government will protect everybody's religion, but the sought after one would be Muslim? Why can't they still have a rule to protect Jews that live there? Why can't they do it similar to like how America did it, right? Where anybody can come here regardless of what you believe religiously.
No, we actually have that. We actually have it in this case. We call it Dima. You know what I'm saying? Okay. We call it protected people. We call them Aludima, meaning the protected people. And sure you call it Dimi. You call it Dimi. So we have Dimi.
Okay, but the war is over land. It's not technically over religion.
But the land is religious. That's the issue.
Well, yeah, I understand that.
You were saying. That's the reason why it's also religious. Yeah. That's the reason why it is connected to. Yeah, that's why it's such a ferocious war because just like you said, the higher group.
But we're talking ferocity. We're not talking cause. Okay, the cause is that Israel keeps taking land, and they built a wall or a fence. It's more than just religion. A lot of it is, Palestinians are basically being caged into the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. And you're correct, right? But there's a reason for it too. The reason is because Palestinians can't just, because of Islam, Palestinians can't just let themselves be under Israeli sovereignty because Muslims want to have that land under Muslim sovereignty naturally because it's a holy site and Muslims want under their sovereignty. So any land that Israel takes is going to have the same effect, even if it's 1 acre.
But let me ask you a question, just theoretically. What if Israel never took land? Then it would be more over religion. Part of the problem is Israel has has in the past
No, but that's the only
actively
reason it's an
gone
issue.
in.
Because look, land is the issue because it's sovereignty. It's sovereignty over holy
Right.
lands.
Exactly.
So to make a long story short, if they never came in, we would never have a problem. Like the whole situation is because of sovereignty issues and the conquest that happened. Israel by force, and I'm not saying it's wrong to have force because Islam spread by force. If you want to tell the truth, right? I'm not saying that but of course we believe our use of force is legitimized, and we believe other forces uses of force is not legitimized. But that's a different story. That's subjective to us, right? But force is how sovereignty is established in the world, and a non-Muslim force came and established sovereignty over a part of over a religiously significant area that was under our wardship, and then we lost our wardship of it to them.
Right, but the interesting thing is it was England who gave the land. It was technically England who installed Israel.
Yes. But look, that's also another historical issue.
So I'm asking, why isn't there a jihad against England?
I'm going to tell you the reason. Let me tell you the reason. It's because the Arabs themselves are the ones who allied with England to take the land. That's how they got the land in the first place, because they allied with England against the Ottoman Turks during World War I.
Okay.
That's why you have the story of Lawrence and Arabia and all them, and then that's why you have the Hashemites who took over these kingdoms that came from Saudi Arabia. These were allied to the British, and that's how even Saudi Arabia got taken over. So the British was entwined into the whole thing. So the British, you know what I'm saying? No jihad against the British for, because it was the British. I mean, this is for the land there. The British were there as just colonial overseers. They weren't there as a permanent thing.
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
Israel's different because Israel is a permanent thing with a civilian population attached to it.
But you know, the interesting thing is that really it was convenient for Europe to find a way to get Jews out of Europe.
Of course it was. And I'm totally sensitive to the issue of the Holocaust, and I totally reject the Holocaust and all the stuff that's been done evil to Jewish people. I reject unfair treatment of Jews.
No,
right?
I wasn't specifically talking about the Holocaust. It was just
I know.
Okay.
No. But that was the main catalyst, though.
Oh,
There's no way around it. There's no way around it.
Yeah,
that was the main catalyst because then it was like, look, people realize that, look, like for example, I would have wished it took a piece of Germany, a big chunk of Germany, and made it made a Yiddish land, and that'd be a place for European Jewry to settle, have a homeland in Europe. But of course, they wouldn't allow that in Europe because the Europeans would never take that. But it took it to people who were vulnerable because they were less invested in them at the time. So it was a vulnerability issue. But that's our fault too as Muslims, because Muslims shouldn't have been that vulnerable. They shouldn't have been so backwards.
I don't disagree with anything you said.
So I partly agree, I partly disagree. So I agree with the fact that, somehow Europe wanted Jews out of Europe. I mean, the rabid anti-Semitism in Europe and the murdering of Jews. So it was a convenient solution for them. I also agree that they took advantage of a weak population. But the land wasn't just picked at random, right? There was a history. There was a history of Jewish presence in that land, right? Confirmed by Islamic sources, right? So it's not out of place. It was not out of place for the state of Israel to be created in Palestine currently. It wasn't out of place, right? So the problem now is the insistence that this is a religious land, so it has to be for one or the other party. It's like a zero-sum game when both sides are saying it's all or none. I have it or nobody has it. The other side is saying I have it or nobody has it. That's where I see the big issue. I really don't see a reason why one state could not have been created that accommodates both Arabs and Jews in the land of Israel, where everybody becomes a naturalized Israeli.
It could theoretically, but these are the issues, right? It could theoretically, but these are the issues. First of all, Jews wanted a homeland. They wanted a territory. I told you the same way you said the rapid anti-Semitism that led to the what's the name that led to the Holocaust. They wanted a territory where they had their own sovereignty and their own military because they needed a defensive state. So that was critical. So that's the main thrust of Zionism was Jews needed a defensive state. So they would have to have it under their control because because their history has shown that they couldn't trust their safety to other people. And the Holocaust was a prime example of that, and that was the main catalyst to the 1948 Declaration of the State of Israel. Even though it was building up Zionist movement, that was the breaking point. That's when it took off. That was the reason. So, but and the State of Israel founded. So that's on the Israeli side. That's the original reason, and and that's compounded by religion. So the reason why Israel had to come in and because you see that land was a Muslim ward for centuries. The British mandate was a brief period just after World War I because of the Ottoman defeat, and it became a British mandate, right? But it was on the centuries under Islamic wardship. So the Muslims had it. And it was part of their identity. It was a big thing for them to have conquered Jerusalem when they first conquered it, and then when it was built, the mansion there.
Jews were not totally absent in Palestine, right? They were not.
Yes, they were not totally absent. There was always Jews, especially in Suffolk. There was always Jews in those areas.
I didn't get that.
No. Yeah. So they were always there in Palestine. They were always there, Jews in Palestine. That's undisputed.
Exactly. So it wasn't as if they just imported Jews. Yeah. So I really don't get why the Muslims and the Palestinians.
You're breaking up, Charles.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is it better?
Yeah, it's good now. It's good. You're good.
Okay. So I still can't see, given all this, the historical context of Jews always being on that land, the factual context that Jews still remain on that land even during Muslim control of the land, right? I still don't see why it was such a big deal that forming the state of Israel there is such a big deal for Muslims that they cannot tolerate Jewish presence at all on the land of Israel. I know it's a religious thing that you don't want to give an inch, but man,
that's the issue, right? The problem is Islam can, but unfortunately we have terrible heresies that are dominating Islam. Like we have fabricated hadiths about killing Jews. We have these fake fabricated hadiths that the Sunnis use. It's mostly Sunni and Shias. They use these hadith about terrorizing Jews. You see a Jew under the rock or Jew under the tree. These are fabricated hadiths that they've created. Why they should be virulently genocidal against Jews, and it's not part of Islam. But unfortunately, yes, these heresies are there where even the president. Because look, we should be able to live. Because look, Jews are the people of the book. We should fully be accepting them living there, even if it's under dima. You know what I'm saying? But you have to understand, we're not here. I mean, this is part of Islam. And it even we even have things that you and the people of the book, let's come to a common agreement. We'll know that we worship God, know that we do right. So the Islam calls us, especially with Jews and also Christians, other people of the book, to find common ground. So
the bottom line is Israel hasn't given much of a reason to coexist peacefully.
Of course, but it's mere present there as a sovereign state in Islam, in the Dar al-Islam, in the Islamic worship, having taken it from it is a blow that the Muslims have to remedy somehow.
So Stanley, what do you think Israel could do better?
Well, again, I'm not an expert, but I think that if Muslims are being bullheaded on one side, there is an Israeli version. The far right, Netanyahu and people to the right of him, they're basically caging people into the Gaza Strip. I don't know that that's the best way. I mean, essentially, the Gaza Strip is under, if not a strict blockade, is under a semi-blockade almost all the time. You know, there
But
are
Yeah.
things like building materials and, you know, a lot of
but
basics. Like
if
Israel
they don't do
controls the
that,
water, Israel controls the electricity. Basically, Gaza doesn't have any autonomy.
so if
No,
they
you
don't
no
do
no
that,
no.
but
No,
if they
because
don't do that, the Palestinians are committed to attacking the Jews,
Well,
committing.
now you have to understand there are two quote flavors. You know, the Hamas group, they're two controlling authorities, one for the West Bank, one.
yeah, but we're talking about Hamas though. We're talking about Hamas though. We're not talking
Right.
about Fatah
Well,
right now.
when
We're
you
talking
say
about Hamas.
Palestinians, you don't, Hamas doesn't represent all Palestinians, is my point.
True, true, true. But if that blockade is lifted, that's like an open ticket for Hamas to
I
carry out
think
as many
you,
terrorist attacks.
I think you were right. It's a catch-22, and I don't have a solution.
Well,
Um,
let me tell you some history. Let me put some history then. You have to understand the same regime that Israel has in the West Bank, they had it in Gaza, and they had some settlements. It wasn't nearly as much as in the West Bank. It was a couple. It was a smaller settlements, but they had some settlements, and they had it under similar regime. Like they have it as a protectorate, like how they have the West Bank right now, with which is which is speeding it into full incorporation, right? So that's how they had Gaza, but they had a unilateral withdrawal, and that was the issue when they had a unilateral withdrawal. That's what opened the gate for Hamas and them to take over. I mean, so I mean, they would have to
right.
try to give them some autonomy. So what I'm trying to say is that what I'm trying to say is that there's no way Israel would have gave the Palestinians autonomy for many reasons. But one of the main reasons is that the Palestinians just don't accept the existence of they barely. They haven't found conditions where they accept Israel's right to exist yet. So it's one of the. I think they've done that, but it's just difficult because not everybody's on board. Like for example, Fatah might be on board with stuff, but then the other side, there's no side that represents the whole Palestinian movement. That's the one problem.
Right. What do what do, what do you think about? I mean, from what I hear, Israel didn't allow people to leave Gaza either.
Yeah, because what happened was when they pulled out, right? When they pulled out, Gaza fell under Hamas. So people are so they locked it in because they don't want they don't want the way to look at it is that the way to look at it is that the only person that want helping them is because they're like, look, why isn't their Arab brother Egypt that's on their border open up for them? How come they haven't done it? That's the way that the Jews are looking at it. No, for real, because that's the issue.
It's a Muslim Brotherhood thing, right?
That's the issue, because even Egypt don't want those people in there
Exactly.
because they're tied to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt too, because they're all part of this Muslim Brotherhood network, so they don't want more problems. And that's their own Arab Muslim brothers.
So
So
they're
what's Israel
basically
supposed to do
the
at that
problem
point?
child of the Middle East.
Yeah, but it's a problem that the Middle East created because they want to they don't want to be sensible, and they don't want to develop. They should when they be sensible, focus on development. They wouldn't have these. They wouldn't have time for this crying over spilled milk. They'll rebuild.
Well, you sound like the Muslim Glenn Loury.
Which is good.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's better than the alternatives. Both sides doesn't want to. They don't want to be reasonable. They don't want to, you know. I've been harsh on Israel this past few days, right? But somewhere in the back of my mind, I still understand Israel's positions in the sense that Israel has a right to exist, or at least as it is now, have a right to exist, and they also have a right to defend themselves. And if they give Gaza that level of autonomy that the Palestinians are looking for, then it's going to be very, very catastrophic for the security and the safety of Israel, of Israeli citizens, right? So, because if you look at the way this attack took place right now, where civilians were massacred and all that, it's so crazy considering the fact that Hamas knows that Israel is a military might compared to Hamas. How can they just do this thing and think that, oh, nothing will happen, we can just do whatever we want?
No,
It's
they know
crazy.
something's gonna happen.
You think they're not expecting the retaliation? They're expecting retaliation, but you understand the issue with people like Hamas. Hamas is willing to take casualties. They have a martyrdom fetish, so they're
Yes.
willing to take casualties. That's the issue. These people just willing to take casualties. That's what you have to understand. They have a martyrdom fetish.
Wow. Wow. There's no, well, I just feel sorry for the I feel sorry for the innocent Palestinians who are being
Yeah, I
recorded
feel
in the
sorry for the
crossfire.
kids. Yeah, I feel sorry for the kids. That's what I feel sorry for. I feel sorry for the youth and the kids because they are stuck in a world where their elders just want to be retarded.
Well, we look forward to a day where people will be much more reasonable and say, let's
Good
put our
luck.
differences aside and let's live. Practice your religion. That's fine. Let me
Well,
practice
one
mine.
thing's for sure: the U.S. won't be leading the way.
Well, we don't need the world doesn't need the US to lead the way, right? So
We think they do.
Now,
I'm saying that. I'm
America just needs
saying
to be a
that.
hub.
I'm making a joke.
yeah, Mr. Pelu, you were saying something.
Yeah, I said America. I mean, it's not. We're never gonna go to a totally unipolar American world, but America could still be a hegemony if it learns because look, America, no matter what, it's a good hub. The whole world speaking English. America is in a central location. It has two great oceans and it has a big navy. It's like even though I mean, if America doesn't overstretch itself and just does what it does good and just be a hub instead of trying to dominate everything, but just be a central hub, it could still be the most powerful player in a multipolar world.
Yeah, we've had 250 years to work towards that, and look how far we've got.
I mean, it's going to happen regardless. It's manifest destiny. You have to have faith in the cause. Manifest destiny.
Look at you, Mr. High School History book.
All
That's
right.
the American project.
Well, one man's manifest destiny is another man's white supremacy.
So I think this is a good place to bring this show to a close. Mr. Pelu, it's good having you. I would wish you would come back more frequently, like we used to have. I wish you would come back more frequently.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Good talking to you, Pamela.
Yeah. So
Okay. Yes, thank you.
hopefully Friday we'll have another show, talk about something else. But thank you very, very much, guys, for coming.
Take it easy, Charles.
Yeah, we'll catch you in another live stream. It's bye for now.